People think that if you have a good product, the product will sell itself. In the world of banking as a service or BaaS, trust is a part of that product, right? And so founders underestimate how long it takes to build trust.
It's always honeymoon until something goes wrong. Somebody has a fraudulent transaction, somebody's money goes missing, and that's when things start getting ugly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening in. I'm Michael, founder of Empath Consulting, a fintechs advisory firm helping founders navigate complex sales and marketing topics. Today, I'm joined by Miroslava, a very seasoned veteran in the BaaS and fintech world. Miroslava, great to have you. Would you like to give a quick introduction to yourself for anyone listening in?
Hey, Michael, happy Friday and trick or treat. It's Halloween day today. Well, hopefully it's going to be a bit of a treat for our listeners. Time will tell. Thank you so much for having me on your episode. I'm Miroslava, and there are many things I feel really passionate about. Fintech's one of them. And I've been super fortunate that I spent the past few years being part of an industry that helps to change the financial services, make financial services more accessible. And that's done through the right application of the banking as a service technology and the overall concept of that. So just super happy to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Thanks, Miroslava. Absolutely. I think when you agreed to this, I was really excited, and I'll tell you why. I think a lot of times when I speak with people, we're focusing a lot on the SaaS world of fintech or very specific technology solutions that are sold into fintech. It's very rare you get access to someone like yourself who has been both in the fintech world, but from a regulated point of view and all the complexities, especially in those early stage BaaS solutions that you've kind of worked with. So really looking forward to the discussion today. And maybe to kick it off, maybe just to give a bit of an overview around what we'll cover. We have kind of four main topics that we'll try and tackle as much as we can in the next 35, 40 minutes or so. First is, as you are unique to BaaS, we want the truths of what makes it difficult in that, the hard truths about selling into BaaS overall, creating a solution in that market because you're combining technology and you're combining regulation and you're combining financial services, and having to package that is something that's difficult, and you're definitely going to have a lot to say there, I'm sure. But then two, you're also a commercial expert and one that I consider really highly regarded, right? So from that point of view, how do you commercialize a BaaS solution? That will be kind of our next topic that we'll cover. Third, you really have worked a lot, as well as I have, a lot of times with founders and helping these founders move away from founders-led sales into a commercialized engine. We both have tons of battle stories to probably share, but I'm sure you bring a fresh, kind of set of those compared to some of my listeners before. And, the last bit is just if we have some time to kind of paint what looking ahead looks like, if we have any kind of tips, tricks. So that would be kind of the four things. Now, to kick it off, right? I guess when it comes to the hard truths about BaaS, one of the things I find, and maybe we could start very quickly with the concept of who you sell to in a BaaS. Maybe you could talk a little bit to me about some of the ideal customers or ideal companies that you typically go after. And for context, as a BaaS solution, you have different financial products that you can probably sell, especially payments and cards and everything in between. You probably have lots of companies that you could sell that too. How do you navigate the complex world of who do we go after, and what are some of the things you look for in those companies when you're selling to them?
I really like how you split it out at the beginning, like the SaaS and BaaS. They both sound great. One of them just proves to be a bit more tricky to navigate, understand, apply, but then the outcome, the end result you get can be significantly different. And that's the true banking as a service. The type of customers that I always want to work with and target, and I think true BaaS providers need to focus on, are the companies that truly understand the importance of compliance, because that's one of the key components and pillars that differentiate essentially the SaaS sale from the BaaS sale. That's going to change the type of a customer you speak with. That's going to inevitably have an impact on the length of your sales cycle. And it's going to also inevitably change the way you structure your commercial strategy and your commercial proposals overall. And start looking of where's my revenue going to start coming from. And so if I come across somebody who wishes to outsource in full the compliance piece and say, yeah, hey, we kind of like want the tech, we like what you're doing, and we like the fact that we can fully outsource all of our compliance stuff and just make the compliance go away. Like, that's not the right mindset. Yes, pairing up with the right BaaS provider that's going to give you the compliance pillar if you want to be providing a regulated financial services is a must. But do not make the mistake of this relationship is going to make your compliance go away. Compliance should never go away. It absolutely must be fully embedded in what you do. At the end of the day, you own the customer. You have the relationship with the customer. And as we know, it's always honeymoon until something goes wrong. Somebody has a fraudulent transaction, somebody's money goes missing, and that's when things start getting ugly. And that's when there needs to be this absolute alignment on understanding the roles and the responsibilities, but also the joint attitude and commitment to compliance. So, super long response to your question, Michael. Sorry. The type of customer I want to sell to and I want to work with is a customer that really understands it's a partnership that's underpinned by the commitment to compliance.
You touched on a couple of really important things, especially when it comes to compliance. And thinking about some of the BaaS providers that you worked with in the very early days when some of these providers were just getting going. When you're building let's say a platform for banks to use that isn't a regulated platform, it's just a technology stack. You don't have so much of a regulatory hurdle to overcome to be able to operate. You actually just have a challenge of knowing how to sell your product and making sure people can actually buy the product and you deliver the value that you say your product is supposed to deliver. That's the biggest hurdle of a SaaS solution. When it comes to BaaS, you have this phase that's really unique, right? You're in the beginning phase where you're probably waiting for a license to maybe be approved potentially. Either that or you have limited versions of a license that you're operating within. So in that phase, you're in this probably difficult challenge where you've got to win customers, you've got to gain traction, and you've got to probably do that in like a phase where like a license doesn't even exist. And yet you're selling compliance, like you mentioned, in regulatory, solutions. You're, from a sales point of view, if you think of yourself in those sales roles for those early days and mainly working with the founders of those companies, how do you manage that? How did you navigate that with the market? Because I think that's really unique.
It really is. And it's an experience I'm super grateful for. I've been fortunate enough to work for a licensed entity that's already scaled, and we're talking about companies that are either part of a joint acquisition between two super brands, a company that can be leading towards potential IPO in not too distant future, and a company that's been super early stage. And that's probably been one that's been closest to my heart, because that really showed me that having a product and product that's work in progress is one thing. Having a product that's work in process that's going to be underpinned by a license that's about 18 to 24 months away is something else. But what it really, really taught me is people want to hear the story. People want to be told how you can help them when the time is right with the right type of a license. And kind of it's a series of months and months and months of conversations that feel just like the conversation, by the way, we're having right now. It's always a chat without any kind of agenda or binding sort of timesheet, letter of intent, none of that. It's helping the market around you and the people around you who want to listen understand the value that working with a fully licensed BaaS provider, the value it can deliver. And then you sort of go, right, okay, well, these are the type of people that are willing to listen. How many more of them are out there, and where can I speak with them? How can I talk to them? Literally, networking becomes your superpower, networking with the right sort of people that want to listen. And then as you're nearing the license, and in Europe, it's a very fragmented market, and UK has got like this super niche part where, well, great, you're a bank now, but we're still going to take 12 months to allow you the license to its full capacity. So you're kind of in this probation period. So you then have another 12 months of going, hey, we have the license now. We still can't use it fully, but we're getting closer. So remember all the good chats we had over time. And I think it's at this point when it's important that the founders are very close to the discussion. But it's at this point also when you start thinking, right, how to take this now, how to take this car out for a drive, really. We've been building it. Let's take it for a test drive. And then start enabling the right people around you to start telling your story and start taking the step back. But it's very much about this consultative chat, building the trust. Because if you just go to someone once, you tell them something, they don't seem to be interested in buying from you there and then, and then you disappear. You are just another person knocking on their door. If you repeatedly come and they know there is nothing in it for you for another year or two, but you're still there, you show up, you continue to show the same level of interest and involvement, this ultimately builds trust. And then it's this trust that probably can start driving your first customers, the first conversions.
It's really good because you've actually pointed up a few things. So one of the things I find a lot with founders is founders underestimate how long it takes to build trust. Always I see this. People think that if you have a good product, the product will sell itself. And in certain cases that might be true. In the world of banking as a service or BaaS or any real consultative selling, methodology that you have to work within, trust is a commoditized part of that product, right? And so you raise a good point because I think what I wanted to kind of, touch on is basically when you are in that phase of building trust with the market, how do you leverage maybe your founder to build that trust? Because when you're in the phase of maybe moving away from a founder-led sale where founders are selling everything and they're involved in everything, and now sales expert comes in and starts to build out a commercial engine or help to build out a commercial engine, how do you then now work with that founder that maybe was so ingrained in everything, but now, you're still trying to build trust with prospects in the market and that narrative there. So anything you could share would be great.
I think that phase is quite tricky because this is their baby. They've been there from the day one. Like every minute of the working days, they dedicate to this project that they try to build, to this thing they're trying to launch. And then all of a sudden, the baby's here, you welcome it, and then you're supposed to hand it over to someone else. And then kind of go, right, okay, I've nurtured it to this point, and now you go and show it off to the world. And that can be a really, really hard thing to do. And I think there is a very natural tendency for the founders to keep saying, I'll show up for this call. Just include me in the call. I'm happy to take the first chat. Copy me on an email. Let me just chip in here. And it's like that sort of, actually, there will be time and a place in that process when I will need to wheel you out. I will need to get you involved, but it's going to be further down the line to kind of bring that extra level of reassurance that, hey, by the way, this is not just me talking to you about this. This is not just somebody in the product team or the engineering team that's now sending you series of dots and zeros and lines or however else codes get created. There is all this other team in the background that you can lean on if it's needed. And this is a joint effort. This is not a one-man band. And this is very important, I think. Don't give anyone the impression that they can spend months speaking to you, but then if they want to get their way, let's say with pricing, they will just reach out to the founder, and that's going to change the whole vibe, and it's going to change the whole narrative, or it's going to change all of the great commercials. So there needs to be like this real balance where the founder is sitting somewhere in the background, is willing to come out on the scene, on the stage at the right time, but is really giving the team that he entrusted in the commercialization of this product, just let them get on with it, because otherwise, what was the whole point reaching out for expertise help in a first place if you're not letting them to do it?
We'll change gears to our next topic in a second, but before we do, just one of the things that I advise a lot of founders on when they come to me because they've received maybe a Series A or a Series B, or mainly in the Series A category, and they are now needing to build or hire their first salesperson or sales team. And the same narrative always appears that you just pointed out. I've been selling it. I know the product. Let me just run the first phase of these calls and have a salesperson come on to be almost like a task-oriented individual, as opposed to a person that brings with them a set of skills to help founders move to a proper commercialized engine. And it's hard. And you're right. And you've picked up on a really good point, because it's a struggle for salespeople to remove a founder from a sale, because to your point, having a founder involved can actually damage the credibility of the person trying to sell and can make it more difficult and can hurt even in negotiation at that point, because they have direct founder access.
Or the point is that the founder's there for the first call, second call, and then they ease off. And then, what, am I no longer important enough for the CEO to be speaking to me now? Am I now just like being passed on to the sales team now? So why was there interest at the beginning? And now I'm on the hook. And so they have them moved on to the next best thing. So it's a super, super fine balance. I absolutely believe. And we live in Berlin, and we're super fortunate to be surrounded by these incredible fintech startups. Lots of them are turning their 50th birthday this year. And then from like a startup to fully licensed entity to getting their first customers. And now they're partnering with like the super big names that are in the traditional banks on the German market. And you can definitely see from the PR releases, but also if you're speaking to the people at like the fintech meetups, like the founder will get involved, of course. But it's about just when is the right time for them to come back in on the scene and add their value. And at that point, the value of the founder getting involved is not applying a discount code. That's just basically undermining your sales team. It's just providing that added level of care. And I don't even want to use the word credibility, because everybody in your organization should operate in a way that whoever they interact with, they're going to think you're a credible organization. So don't think and don't use your founder as a credibility card. Every person on your team is your credibility card.
I love this. I think that credibility is definitely just as credible from a security compliance person as it would be actually a founder. So I think that's a really good shout. And it's a good segue into our kind of next topic, which is around building a commercial engine, which you've kind of already alluded to. Is the first step in building a commercial engine is helping to remove a founder purely from the founder-led sale. But the other part to that now, and just switch gears, is around one of the challenges I see, and this might be relevant for also some of the challenges you've seen with your earlier stage companies you've worked with, is when a business has, or a startup has, maybe let's say a very limited amount of capital, which is, I think anyone listening in right now probably has shared some challenge around this in the past, definitely 24 months. But if limited capital exists, you're going after a consultative sale. You've got a massively complex and, building trust with your prospects. You also have to convince them that you're a safe solution, especially in banking as a service. You have to identify which of the financial products are even relevant, the commercial structure to get this going. So you've just got so many things to do. But you probably have a team that's not that big, and you probably have hardly any money to spend on some of the big marketing campaigns that maybe your competitors are doing. I'd love to hear a little bit from you and what some of the things you've seen in that kind of a stage of a business and how you've navigated that successfully, kind of.
I think one of the tendencies that everybody has, right? We got MVP, great. Now MVP is a fully launched product. The license is there. We made some PR announcements. We have to sell this. Great. Let's get 5 salespeople on board quickly. Like, this is the profile. They need to be able to sell, ideally from financial services. And then they arrive. They get welcomed by the founding team, for example, like your CEO or CTO being doing the sales. And they go sell this. From a day one, you have this massive divide, because what the founder was able to sell maybe at the sort of first 10 customers will be super, super different to what now the expectations are. Now go get me another 10 plus 10 plus 10, because they're never going to be the same as the first 10 customers. When you have a brand new license, when you have a brand new product, the first 10 customers are not just your first revenue generators. They co-build, they help to design. They should feel like what I like to call the friendlies. So if the solution doesn't work, if there is a glitch, they tell you and you work together on defining and bettering the solution. And you cannot expect that your next 10 plus customers going to look the same, but they hire a team that's supposed to just like deliver the number. What worked in general much better from what I've seen, especially when I was at the startup bank, and I was their first commercial hire. And together with the chief commercial officer, we said, hey, we've got to think about the why. Like, why will market want to buy from us before we start going, how are we going to do this? So like hiring 5 BDs or business development people or sales managers is the how. But like, why are we doing it? And the space between the why and the how has to be filled with a very detailed understanding of the market fit, the right message, like the product readiness. And then you need to, that's kind of like, that's like your theory. Like you starting at a med school and you learn, hey, I've got this many bones. And that's a world different to, I have to do a knee replacement on somebody. So I'm just using the bones example because my mom recently had her knee changed, and it's fascinating. But I'm like, it's exactly the same in sales. You can't just go straight to the knee transplant. You first have to understand the theory of it. And often to do that, that part in the middle will no longer come from the CEO and founder. He's going to have to start focusing on the next round of funding. Like he needs to start, he laid the foundations of the first customers. He needs to start thinking, where's the next money coming from? Bring somebody on a level that can be, it can be a permanent person, it can be a fractional person from outside of the organization that's first going to do 2 things, right? These are the characteristics of your client base that you have. This is the funding and the runway you currently have available. This is the expected outcome. What are the resources you have in the company? You've got a product team, fantastic. You've got a compliance team, fantastic. You've got marketing, amazing. How can a person or multiple people from the teams, from the resources you have readily available, jointly contribute towards shaping that foundation first? Start bringing them in onto the calls. You don't have to have 5 salespeople straight away to deliver the numbers. Have a person that understands your market fit, your product, that understands how and when to pull in the right resourcing from different parts of the business. Not only this is then achieving the revenue growth, again, it's showcasing to your customers, we are a company that's thought about this setup. We're a company that's got resources, expertise, and that brings us back to the whole trust thing again. So use what you have in a smart way. Bring in a person that can help you to set this up. And once this is figured out, then start using the cookie cutter method of repeatable sale. But that's what you need to get to that.
I love this, Miroslava. I really love this because one of the things that I also see to kind of complement what you just described is when a founder is ready to start moving into their first commercial sales hire, you've hit the nail on the head. They always want to bring maybe a bunch of people on board, or maybe even it's not them, it's their VC that has said, you need to hire a massive sales team of 5 people, and you need to make sure that these are all enterprise people and spend a whole bunch of money. You and I have both seen that narrative doesn't really play out that well, if hardly ever actually really works that well. And so what I would work with a lot of founders on mainly is also, do you need a person that can really sell your product? So do you need someone that has amazing solution demo skills and can actually be a more competency in this world? Is that the right kind of an approach? Do you need a salesperson because you're cracking a new market, and maybe you need someone that is a big figurehead in that market, so you just put them in as a country manager, but maybe they're terrible at selling and they're just really good at talking, and that's a great thing. And a lot of times in that example, people get frustrated because they're like, I hired a salesperson and they're not selling, but yet they're just opening up a lot of conversations. And I always say that's kind of what the person's role is if that's the setup that you have. So you shouldn't be disgruntled by it. And that's a really good point you raise around, find out who you really want to work with and look at the internal teams that you have that can complement some of the skills that you lack, so you don't end up having a massive sales team just to fulfill tasks. So I think, there's a lot there, and I think that's really great because there's a lot of points I'd still want to make. I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to finish, kind of pivot us to our next topic, if that makes sense for you, just because we've only got two more of them. It's kind of now, we've been talking a little bit about it already on a number of fronts, but one of the things I think would be good to kind of point out is around what founders often get wrong in this stage. And so we've talked a bit about team already. I think we just had a great, discussion on that. We talked a little bit earlier around when to be involved actually in an engagement and when to not. One of the things I think would be really interesting is, how and when do you see a founder needing to hire actually a salesperson? And maybe when is it better for them not to hire a salesperson? And this is an open question because I'm curious from the sales lens and point of view, how do you see that and what would be something you think would be important there?
One of the mistakes I see is, and it brings me slightly back also to the resourcing, because you mentioned VCs, Michael, is often choose your VCs in the way that they don't just bring money to the table. Sure, money helps, but what else can they bring in? Like, how is their team structured? Do they have somebody on the commercial strategy? And probably you could utilize that first to help you start building sort of the revenue and the team. So there's just going back to like utilizing what you have to the best ability at the beginning. And then I think a big mistake is to get the first salesperson almost as that MVPs out of the door, because you still don't really know like what you're really selling, how is that shaping, and all you're going to end up doing is people who are trying to sell a half-finished product that nobody's buying. And salespeople are driven by two things. There is, based on my experience, there is that kick, that adrenaline that's like real, well, I sold, like somebody bought from me. And that's just like giving you that extra energy. And the more you sell, the more successful you are, because you're just on this real hype wave. And then, of course, sales people are often also motivated by money. If you're not selling anything, you're not making the money, and then it starts falling apart. And then the worst thing that can happen is you have like these 6-8 month cycles, and people move on, and then you have to start from the beginning. And then you start mixing the sort of, oh, I just have a newcomer that crossed over somebody who leaves in 2 months. The vibe started to be off. The culture of the sales team starts falling apart. This talk about culture brings me to one mistake that I see, not just founders, but especially big companies making, when they say, we want to hire highly competitive, hungry people. If this is you apply for this job, and they end up just building a team of egos and that work in silos. And then the work in silos is one of the most dangerous things you can do. Like, transparency is super, super important to the success of your commercial strategy. Every team can have only one Messi, and you can't build a team of 10 Ronaldos and 10 Messis. And I don't even know why I'm using this example, because I'm not at all interested in football, but I think probably lots of listeners are, so it's quite relatable. Don't think that you can bring in 5 big egos, 5 big hitters. Like, don't even use those words when you're promoting the job. When you're thinking about bringing the job, bring somebody that leaves the ego at the front door of your office and just brings a very structured, very calm view and kind of ability to break everything down into tasks and then start building the team around that.
I agree, because there's an interesting thing you raised as well, because when you have companies that are building, they have this amazing salesperson, and having been a part of, very early days at Mambu, right? We were like 4 or 5 of us in the very, very early days. And a lot of us had to build the, sales kind of commercial team from scratch. And actually, none of us really had any big experience doing this before too. So we were thrown into it. Along the way, it's easy to get trapped in this, I built this, I did X, I did Y. I'm now entitled to like be in this. This is my thing. And this is also, you pointed out rightly, is it can also, inadvertently create internal silos that people haven't seen. And while you probably have an amazing team producing in terms of revenue, you are severely risking your business because you have it all in the hands of a few people. And if that 1 or 2 people that have said silo, leave, you end up having a significant drop in, like you said, culture and team and revenue and traction and momentum. And that's probably the hardest part for any sales team. I'll give just one example too that I saw with another company that I'm advising right now. They it's a CEO of a rather unique biotech, actually, company, completely not in fintech, which is interesting. And they are about to bring on their first salesperson. And this is also the first time this founder has ever led any kind of sales motion. They're a genius in their mind, but it's very different for them to enter into sales. And one of the things that we're working on is they need to build a commission structure for their first time because their VC wants this in place and it's a part of the whole remuneration plan they're building for next year. Immediately, the founder that I'm working with has said, we'll just, tell them how much commission's available in the bucket from the financial plan and just let them, have it if they can close some engagements, thinking that was the motivation factor. But to your point, my caution was you end up rewarding one individual for all of the company's success. You should be thinking about how can you take whatever amount of commission that can be allocated from your cost of sale and giving some to product, giving some solution consulting for, maybe as a bonus structure, and then a salesperson being motivated by their version of success instead of creating this potential silo. So I loved hearing that because I think it's something that still is happening today and it's a very common thing.
Only super recently, I had a chat. Oh yeah, I'll help you out. No problem. It's not like I get any of the commission, but yeah, happy to join the call. And it's really, really was like dawned on me like, yeah, what there is a huge imbalance. And now, so probably what I would say is if you are thinking about creating a commission structure, apps for the commercial team, like how you're rewarding the rest of the company. Because a salesperson is only as good as the product that they can sell. And the product is only as reliable as the license that can underpin it and the trust that the customers have. So somebody in the compliance has just as much contribution towards the company revenue as somebody that is just out there, and they are 2 super different roles, but all of it together brings this product together to life and to the market. And yeah, so I'll be really keen to see the outcome of the exercise that you're doing there.
I love that. And one final topic on this before we go into next steps is actually it's a good segue into this topic. It's around tying it back to the BaaS or banking as a service world, because commission, and especially for salespeople, it's usually tied to closed revenue and new revenue. And so if we think about that phase of a sale when you're actually closing engagements, we're kind of going back a little bit to now the sales world. What do you find with pricing, contracting? Because this obviously impacts commission and sales. And especially when you're moving from a founder-led sale, now you've got your first salesperson in a business or startup, and you're now trying to close a contract. And you kind of said it already, those first 10 customers were priced a certain way. And now you want, a founder saying we need to price this way because this is what we want to get from every future customer. How do you navigate all of that, especially when you're trying to close a contract, trying to design the right pricing model, but maybe dealing with some challenges in the, what the founders might expect for a business, particularly also in the BaaS banking as a service world, which is extremely complex when it comes to pricing?
One of the real useful exercises we did when I was at Griffin, we actually did reach out to our network of VCs and looked for experts there, pricing experts that helped us to just make a bit of a sense in it. Because as you said, Michael, the first 5 customers, it's always like, "Oh, thanks goodness you're on board. We need this PR." The pricing looks different. And I don't mean just from monetary and revenue impact point of view, but it's scribbled somewhere on an email, tens of emails, undersigned by, "Yes, dude, let's do this." And you've got your customer, that's your pricing. Well, that's not repeatable, that's not scalable. So then when designing the pricing, always think about what is the biggest value of what I deliver here, and don't be shy to really put that in the pricing agreement. And when challenged on this, and I'm referring to things like platform fees, for example, which are often challenged. Now, like, well, do you not value the work we've built? Do I not value the work of the teams that build this, for example? And then whatever pricing you put, whatever item you put on your pricing agreement, just make sure that you feel confident about not defending it. You shouldn't be defending your pricing, just very clearly explaining why is it there. So like, why is this price this way? Why am I charging you this fee? And then of course, second part is hugely dependent on what is your overall strategy. Like, are you a volume driven business? Are you a kickback driven business? Or are you purely a platform with unlimited use based on monthly subscription? So that depends from the type of product and solution you're selling. But then never forget, and in particular in the BaaS space, you're not just pricing the use of a tech, there is a license. It took you 5 years and a few million and probably some gray hair to get this license. Reflect that. That has the value. People come to banking as a service provider because they bring in this real element of the licensed, credible partner. And this is not to undermine the SaaS sales, but to build up a tech takes a lot less time than to get licensed. To maintain a tech is a very different thing to maintain a banking license. And so when you are in this space, always think, what is the one thing that was the hardest to get and therefore has the greatest value? And that's the differentiator in the style. And then explaining like this, a conversation about commercials doesn't have to go just like, can I get a tiered pricing or can I get 20% off because somebody else is pricing it this way? Okay, why are they pricing it this way? Is their business model different to ours? And feel free to challenge it and like feel free to open it. Oh yeah, I can't really discuss that. Well, if you can't have an open conversation with me, I can't give you an open answer or come to a workable solution on the pricing structure and values. Never be afraid to talk about pricing, and it's basically just showcasing the value that you believe your business has.
I love that's really great because with a lot of banking as a service providers I've encountered in my career, although I haven't really anywhere close to as much as you have, of course, having worked for them. This seems to be a very common challenge that I see a lot. So I think you painted that extremely nicely. Miroslava, we have just one final kind of question I wanted to ask you about the future. And I originally was coming into this thinking like, I'll just ask you, what's the future of embedded finance? But everyone listening has probably heard 20 billion versions of this. I'll ask you something that's a bit different. You, particularly if you think about the future of mainly the banking as a service world, what do you think is one thing that separates people that will be successful versus the companies that won't be successful? If you had to think of one thing, maybe two if you have to.
The way you select who you're going to work with, naturally there is a tendency of, whether you launching a B2B product or B2C product even, there's this natural tendency of let's just get on board everyone and anyone we can. And then see who sticks and see what happens. And from my experience, I have seen programs that went from 0 to 100,000 users in their first 6 months. And then they report, oh, we got million signups. And then the reality of this hits. So are you ready to support million users? Is your platform stable enough to withhold that amount of increased traffic? Are you ready to answer questions about missing transactions? Are you ready to face the fraud? Are you up to speed with the challenges that end users now have because the fraud levels and fraudsters are getting smarter and smarter and smarter? And at the end of the day, are you ready to face the consequences this might have with the regulator if 40% of your clients are responsible for 2% of countries' fraud, for example? So the ones that I believe going to succeed is the ones who truly think about who they want to work with and stick to that plan. Because it's really, really easy to get excited about just building up a number.
That's a really good thing. So it's two things, right? It's actually first defining very clearly, even though you can support all of this, just support this because this is who needs you the most and who you're ready to work with. And I love that you said also, don't try and make sure you're ready to be fraud proof. A lot of people try and say, no, we're going to be so protected and safe. And of course, that's the goal of any business. But being prepared to handle whatever happens in that world is actually more important. So I love that.
And there's one more point, I think, if to this, the ones that are genuinely ready to ask for money for their service, they're the ones that's going to stick in. So choose who you want to work with and don't be shy to get paid for your work.
That's really good to have, right? Awesome. Miroslava, listen, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this chat. So many pointers and tips, and actually a lot of things I even learned today too about it. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone listening in. Talk to you soon.